Have you ever thought that we just need to slow down, but that the system requires us to be really efficient and speed up? And that's, I think, what I felt through your stories, Martin, was the conscious decision to slow down, to hear people, to see their humanity, and to understand.
And Alice came to the UK in the 1950s. And when she arrived in London, Alice went straight to Trafalgar Square to feed the pigeons. And she shot Street, where Kenneth lived, just around the corner from where Lenin lived. And she worked for a pharmaceutical company and then in the garments trade. Alice was employed as a long-term caretaker in the block of flats. And Alice got married and had 2 daughters. And she loved going out with her friends and dancing. And she lost her husband in 2011 and a daughter in 2018. And her other daughter visits daily. When her daughter died, quite unexpectedly, Alice stopped going out and she was challenged by multiple morbidities, osteoarthritis of the knee and shoulder, and frailty, as well as cataracts, glaucoma, and depression. And Alice used to be a keen dancer, and she loved to go out, and she then found it difficult to use her hands. The district nurse became concerned about Alice, and I referred Alice into my first family group conference with Azara here, the FGC coordinator. Azara booked a community centre for the FGC. And the centre was near to Alice's and her other daughter's flat, opposite Kenneth Williams' flat, just around the corner from Lenin's flat for the family group conference. And this is Azara when she was younger. I was really impressed by the tenacious detective work of Azara and the myriad of ways that Azara employed to bring together a diverse group, a conference of individuals from the life world around Alice, to arrange the FGC in a place near and meaningful to her. Azara worked intensively with Alice opposite. In your paper, you talk about the preparation phase for the FGC. And through that work, we discovered that there was a wide support network around her, which Azara identified through preparation for the FGC. And previously, that was hidden to us. Some of those neighbours had known Alice for over 30 years, and they remembered her as a caretaker, and they were a subsequent great resource and source of support for her. After the family group conference, Alice was invited to a mainstream adult social care event. This was held in the Holiday Inn, which Alice can see from her window. There were many social workers and managers there. And in front of the entire conference, Alice said, "I live next door, so welcome to my neighbourhood." And she then added as an afterthought, "I have never seen so many social workers sitting together in one room, so I feel very safe." And I think she was actually joking when she said that. Then Alice got up, and in front of everybody, she danced to the Jimmy Cliff song, "You Can Get It If You Really Want."
When people talk about FGC, we talk about it being held in a meaningful place, a meaningful location for the person whose FGC it is. And I see a lot of FGCs, like I work across a lot of different local authorities, and that component often seems to be missing, or it gets lost. You know, there are places, you know, where an FGC is always held in the same place because that's the place that has a room and is cheap and is free at a certain time. We can find meaning in places. They don't have to be beautiful or grand. You know, it's about finding a place that matters to that person you're working with, and actually what that can unlock for people, being somewhere where they feel belonging or recognition, but also bringing other people into that space, inviting people in, saying, "I've set this up the way I want it, and I want you to come in and see me with my people around me and engage with me on that ground," can be really powerful. But also it takes braveness from practitioners as well to step out of their comfort zones sometimes and go and meet people, you know, where they're at home, wherever that is. So yeah, I just think it's really powerful thinking about where these where the places that these, FGCs are held and how important they are, and not forgetting about that.
The Lucy Lippard quote that you used, Martin, that talks about place being replete with meaning. Only 2 weeks ago did my mum's FGC. My mum wasn't going to do her conference anywhere other than her living room, where she'd given everyone cake for 70 years. And so that was an important thing, and it was all her friends that reminded her, who'd eaten her cakes for 50 years, that was what we needed to have. And loads of brilliant things have come out of that. We're all trying to work towards something that's going to improve all of our lives, and the truth is kind of like, it's a difficult one because there isn't necessarily one. However, we want to work together. So how are we going to give enough space for all that difference that needs to happen, even if we're all trying to get to the same kind of truth about whatever's best for that family? And I think if we give ourselves and each other enough space and enough time for whatever truth to kind of, it's almost like being able to birth a new truth. I think we come to these things thinking there's something that we've got to find out, but I think there's something we've got to create together.
I think she was about 5, and I picked up the phone and I said, hello, and she kept telling me her name, and I thought, oh, it's the child, but I don't know how she got my number. So I said, who is there with you? She said, my nana. And I said, well, can I speak to your nana? And that's who we're speaking. She said, oh, it's me. I said, oh, is this the child we're talking about? She said, yeah. And I said, well, actually, I think she'll benefit from the family group conference, because if she's telling me that she wants to talk, then I think we should, you should allow her to, to take part.
And it just makes me think, we've not really talked about children. I would love to see more FGCs where children pick the place that they're held. They pick the agenda, and, they have a more kind of meaningful role, because I feel like quite often in child and family social work, we think about whether or not it's appropriate to invite a child into our adult space, into our adult way of making decisions. I think FGC has that potential to be led by the person that it's meant to be about, whether that's, someone who has dementia, whether it's, a child who we might say, they don't fully understand the concerns. And I think it really has that power to be much more democratic. So I just wanted to mention that, potential. And I love the lifelong links work that's going on now with family group conferencing, because quite often child protection social work or removing children from families is about taking them away from the places that are meaningful to them, and breaking those connections with people, but also with places and with memories. And I think recognizing that children and adults all have a right to connections with places.
I was thinking about my first FGC, actually, which was when I was training as a social worker in Cardiff. And so that's a connection to Wales, which is still really in the room, because Carmen now works for Cascade in Wales, and that long connection with Seth and with Lorna as well. So, but yeah, I was like training to be a social worker, and I found out about a Family Good conference and persuaded the lecturers to get a placement in a Family Good conference. This little project called Family Circle. It was a really cute little project, and it was nice to be able to phone people up and say, oh, hi, it's Tim from Family Circle. It was like that independence thing where you had, you didn't have to say you're from the council or whatever. But so it was this young person called Jade who had just moved back to Cardiff and was living in this residential unit. And she'd lived away for quite a long time and lived with different foster carers in North Wales and also in England. but Cardiff was her home. Cardiff was where she was born, and I went to see her in this, and she was quite savvy, you know. She was savvy and I wasn't, because I was like this new social worker kind of thing. And I was trying to explain family conference for the first time. And I don't think I did it particularly well, to be honest. I think I was really going on the theory, and I'd sort of like swallowed the textbook, but I hadn't quite learned how to explain it more relatably. So I don't know, I started not twisting her arm, that sounds bad, but I was desperate for her to come to this FGC. And she'd kind of already started doing the coordinate work herself, because she'd gone out and found her brother's girlfriend worked at a local hairdressers. So she'd gone out and like introduced herself to her when she moved back to Cardiff, and she'd like found, through her, she'd found an auntie, and so she'd started doing the detective work herself. And but I said I could organise an FGC, and finally she agreed. She did have a couple of stipulations. She said I had to wear different clothes when I came to the FGC. And she said I needed a different bag as well, because I kind of got myself some new clobber for this social work course. And I had a nice leather bag, which I thought was like really like what you needed to do when you're starting a new job like that. And she wasn't feeling it. And so she also had some requirements around the food, because she wanted sandwiches, but she didn't like butter in her sandwiches. And then there was some other complicated things, and so I didn't have like a food hygiene certificate or anything, but I was making all these sandwiches at home in my flat, like, just making all this mad food that she wanted. And she also wanted me to play this like hip hop tune at the start of the meeting, which I realised afterwards wasn't, the lyrics weren't particularly clean, but I played that as well. And then she said she wanted to have it in this, like, it was like a kind of working person's club, like in Cardiff, called the Electricity Club, old school, and it's a bit of a dusty kind of old room really, but it felt good that she'd chosen it, and her family knew that as a venue. And there was some strangeness about it, because the social worker and her manager came, because it was the first time the social worker had done an FGC, the first time that team had done a family good conference or been involved in one. And it was like the longest private family time in history. It was like, because this was like this family reunion. And so I was sitting in the bar of this like working men's club with this social worker and a manager for just hours on end, and they kept saying, "Oh, can we leave? Because we've done but I'd read the textbook that says no, they need to stay until the end. So I was like, no, you can't leave. And I just like basically locked the door. And so just that strangeness of place and the novelty of it, which was so energized it for the young person and for her family, also kind of made it unusual for the social worker and a manager, and unusual for me as well. Yeah, but looking back, it was a nice FGC, a nice one to have for my first one as well. Yeah.
It led me to want to do the training myself and become a coordinator myself for a few reasons. Initially, to get some work, get paid, but also because I do have a genuine interest and passion in FGCs. Now that I've seen the impact that it can have on families and on young people. So I done my training October, so it wasn't that long ago, and I thought I actually knew everything already, which was a little bit naive of me. So I've gone into it and it actually blew my mind. And for anyone in this room that hasn't done the training already, it's definitely recommended, because there's always going to be something in it that you're going to learn. There's going to be something in it that you'll take away or think differently.
Maria was the coordinator, Martin was the social worker. And the connection for this family group conference, it was almost a self-referral, because there'd been a previous family group conference with a person connected to him, and he'd attended it and said, I want a family group conference. Martin had got involved in his role and facilitated it by becoming allocated and doing the referral in. Maria really coordinated it, brought it together in the place of his choice where he's living. And then at the review, we found different family members attending with other professionals as well and pulling together to get this thing moving on. And it turns out that this man living in extra care supported living right now had such an interesting life. Sheltered accommodation, thank you. Such an interesting life that it almost came into a reality. We were all immersed in a reality. And the man himself, because of a cognitive impairment, couldn't always relate to what we were saying. But having a niece there, having a lifelong friend there, and a family friend there to prompt, we really found that it moved along and worked. Because there was a safeguarding concern from two different areas about this one particular man. And rather than following all that formal process as the system would dictate that we ought to, giving that man the ability to have his own story and his own truth heard by the people that support him on that day was magnificent, really. It was so impressive.
First family group conference I organised for a child who was in care at the time. He hadn't lived with his parents for a long time, and his gran, who he lived with, had died, and it was incredibly traumatic. And I, sort of getting to know him, he spoke about having this huge network of people who he used to live around in his estate. And I remember going to see one of these people. I suppose I was thinking as a social worker, I've got to find someone who can look after him now. But actually very quickly it ended up moving from somebody who could look after him to this person who I spoke to said, oh, go and speak to Jackie down the corridor. And I went and knocked on this person's door, and I sat on Jackie's sofa, and, you know, I can still feel the sort of the light in that room and the smells in that room, that this young person had lived in this estate and been able to move in and out of all these different homes and had all this network there that, you know, he through talking to me about these relationships he had, I was able to bring these people together in one room at his family group conference with his foster carers, his birth parents, and this whole network of people. And I suppose for me to have sat in those rooms and understood and felt those same feelings and smelled those same smells, I was able to really, I don't know, I suppose feel at one with him and able to do something together.
Alice came in the early 50s and, you know, stayed with her family, with her husband, had children, and worked in an area and lived in that same area. So when the referral came, I went to visit her. Well, I had a discussion with the social worker, and then I went to see Alice. And then I started in English, speaking to her. And then at some point, she said to me, are you from Ghana? And I said, yes. And then she just switched to Tree. It's not Ashanti, it's Tree. People who are from Ashanti area speak Tree. I just happen to know how to speak that language because I'm not from that area in Ghana, but I can speak Tree. So when she switched and we started speaking, she never forgave me for that. She said, next time you see anyone from Ghana, you must always speak your language. And I thought, okay, if I spoke my language, you wouldn't even understand me. But anyway. But the FGC went on. And what was interesting about that was the fact that it wasn't her family that came to the FGC. It was people she worked with and lived with in that area. She had, at the time, had two daughters, one who didn't want to take part. And as you know, FGCs are voluntary. You can't make people take part. So I said, well, that's fine. I'll send you the plan once it's done. So it was only her people that she knew on the estate that turned up. And I think we had about 10 of them. And it was really, really, really good because what one of them said in the statement towards the end was that this is how communities should be, because they went into her flat. They were able to help her with little bit of hoarding, rearranging her photographs, rearranging her plans, and just, one of them opted to cook food and bring it in once in a while. One was taking her to the cemetery to visit her husband's grave. One would take her shopping. And that's what family group conferencing is all about. So for me, it reminded me of reconnecting and just going back to the basics, really.
The last one was with Azura at the Holiday Inn in Camden Lock. And the hotel was important to Mahila as she had her church fellowship meetings in the same building, and she then felt comfortable to go ahead with the FGC. And she said afterwards, a family group conference is about you as a person. It is about your family and friends and the people around you. She said, we got to talk about what we wanted. A family group conference, she said, is all about how you try to get the best out of life, for everyone to be together in the same room at the same time. So for instance, I had the occupational therapist there, the social worker there, somebody from sensory and hearing team, everybody there just working together, trying to work out a plan. It just makes a lot of difference. Things have happened a lot quicker. After that FGC, we were successful in moving Mahila and her son, Nathan, to a brand new twin bedroom flat. They were the first people in there, immaculate flat, lovely balcony. They both love it. We had to get Camden legal team involved as Nathan lived out of borough and there was an objection and he wasn't legally resident. And she, after the FGC, Mahila wrote to me and said, I've now got my hearing aids and I played the FGC video wearing them. For the first time ever, I enjoyed the sound of my voice. I had to send the video to one of my sons to ask him whether that was how I really sounded. Nathan said it was. So for the first time, I got to hear how others hear me. I understand how they see me. Because of this process, I have quite literally found my own voice.
I just want to remind everybody, young people deserve respect. If you respect them, they will listen to you. But if you go with them with an attitude, it's not going to work. So I had a referral with 3 young people. And these young people have been in care for quite some time. They haven't seen each other. They haven't seen their family. And I asked myself, oh my God, how am I going to do this? So when I started working around with families, there were negatives and positives and difficult, and I don't want to be in the same room, and da-da-da-da-da. But we had the youngest who was 12, and I decided to use the youngest to help me plan this journey. And we planned it very, very well. And to cut the story short, I asked her what her theme would be for this meeting. And I said, we can call it a party because we're going to see everybody we haven't seen. And she said that was a good idea. And we sat down and thought of the balloons and decorations. And, I went out with her to kind of decorate the room. She chose the colors, she chose everything she wanted. She chose the menu as well. And then we sat down and did the invitation list. Now, the older sister was watching every step I made. I didn't realize, but I was working with all of them, but I did request that the younger one was going to take the lead with me as well. And they agreed. But the outcome of this was, it was such a lovely meeting. I haven't experienced anything like that before. The family eventually came together. Some of them were not talking, but I made them talk in the conference. They were able to cry and rejoice. And when they had the private family time, so myself and the social worker went out and they choreographed a dance. And they invited us in, and that was the whole family dancing with music on. It was really, really nice to see them cry together, dance together, and rejoice together. It was interesting to see the adults trying to copy the young people as well. Yeah, they were trying to copy, but in the beginning, they were dancing their own things, and the young people could stand and look at them and say, no, let's do it this way. And I think they took almost 20 minutes of dance, which was really great. And we just couldn't believe how they were shaking. And I think they knew the rhythm of the dance is something that young people know about. So it was interesting to see them dance, to see the grandmother dancing as well. So it was really nice. So it was a very meaningful meeting. One of the young people has become a spokesperson for lifelong links. I think she's going around everywhere now speaking about it. And she's decided she's going to be a social worker because she thinks this is a very good way to bring them together. Thank you.
There's no two families the same. So for me, for you to give a recommendation, one shoe doesn't fit all. And what I think will work for my family won't necessarily work for your family. And what I think might be the right decision, you are unable to implement in the way that I'm able to implement it. I wanted to talk a bit about language and finding a familiarity with someone. So I have a family I'm working with now, which is the largest family I've ever worked with. They have 12 children, 10 of them are in care, looked after children, and it's been quite a lengthy FGC. I've done FGC after FGC after FGC on different elements of the family life. Myself and Maria's worked on this conference a little bit as well. She's been the advocate for some of the older children. Where I went earlier was to just speak to the social worker again, just to rediscuss some of the court implications of what's been happening. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this conference is that the mum became quite difficult with the local authority. She didn't want to engage anymore. She's got 10 children in care. Understandably, it's a lot for anybody to go through. We really rebuilt a really positive rapport. Maybe it's the way I look, maybe it's just the conversations we built, but I was really able to extract positive communication from mum over the past, say, 6 to 8 months on each FGC. And now the local authority is still having difficulties with engagement, but I can always get hold of mum no matter when I try. And I think it's a sense of familiarity in language, like maybe I just speak her language. And for me, the language I speak is humanistic. You know, I'm a person, you're a person. I'm in no position to judge you, nor am I a social worker. And I think it really resonated with mum and dad and the family network, because I've been able to really create meaningful work from this family. And yeah, I just wanted to discuss on that.
No, I absolutely agree. And I like that, the way that you explained it about speaking their language, even though it's not a foreign language as such. And obviously I do a lot of youth work myself, and respect and language are like the two most important things when we're talking about young people. So I think sometimes we have to be really aware of ourselves and who else is involved in what we're doing and the work that we're doing, because you know, it's not easy at the best of times, but if we want to get the best out of people, we need to respect them and speak their language.
I think it's something about trust you were talking about. We know that as a family group coordinator, from the beginning, you have to actually build trust with the family for anything to progress. And families can only do that if you have time, if you give them time to do that. Sometimes you step back and then wait for a bit and then come back again, you know, just so that you're giving them the opportunity that you've heard what their concerns are. You know they're afraid, you know, but there is another way of looking at things. And I think if you give people the opportunity to you know, use that space to be able to come back to you when they are ready, I think that is why family group conferences are being so successful. And to be honest, every referral is a success because they don't have to go to family group conference to be successful. Just by the fact that you've been in touch with them, you've left a leaflet, you've spoken to them about something that's available out there, you've planted the seed.
I had a family group conference meeting for my niece. It was 10 years ago now, but I had the first we knew about it as a family was I had a phone call one afternoon from Peter Collins, who's a really dear friend of mine now. When he said what was going to happen, we're going to have this meeting, and straight away my defences went up. And I quite blatantly said, there's no way you're taking these children away from my knees over my dead body, end of. And he reassured me that wasn't the intention, that the intention was to keep the family together. So, and the worst part was not knowing. My niece hadn't told anybody how she was struggling with my nephew. He was 6 at the time, he's got a few issues. I felt awful. I thought, to think that she'd sat and cried night after night because she had no help. So we went along to the meeting, and the family attended. Her mum is my sister, and we attended with my daughters and her brother. And we walked in. Everybody's frightened. Doesn't matter how many times you're reassured that, you know, this is not what we're doing. You don't believe it. You don't, especially when social services are involved. We sat down at the meeting, and I thought, here we go, we're off. But it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And by lunchtime, when we had the break, we had already planned as a family what we were going to do to help. And the meeting was 100% successful. I've got to say that with hand on my heart. And we've had another one since, but that was for his schooling. He was having problems at school. And so we had a family group conference with the school, again with Peter. So I have been on a family group. I've also been on child protection meeting, which was awful, but the outcome was good on that as well. So I just want to say it does work, and thank you to the coordinators for all your hard work.
The more you just show up and allow the person to be themselves, allow them to make the mistakes, allow them to grow, allow them to basically have the freedom, allow them to have the freedom. A lot of people are talking about power, but I haven't heard much about what that power is. How is that power shown? But obviously, I feel like FGCs allow everyone, not just the person that's having an FGC, godparents, neighbors, the environment, everyone to actually be involved. And it's not necessarily be involved, it's presence. Deshaun might want something for me, but it might not be the best. Seth might want something for me, might not be the best. But having those collaborations, having those ideas, I'm not controlled by anyone. I have people that I could go to, people that could give me ideas and opportunities, people that could give me advice. It might not be the best advice, but having that knowledge altogether later down the line is something that's I'm definitely going to use, regardless of what happens. Like in the question earlier, it was the proud moment. I referenced Deshaun to the person I was chatting about because he recently thanked me for being a part of his learning process, and I didn't acknowledge how much I played a part in his growth as a professional, and he said as well as a personal. So it was just like, for him to be himself, allowing me to be myself, allowing us to grow together, allowing us to, there's no control. There is no, I don't have control. He don't have, no one has control over where we're going to be tomorrow. You can only put things in place to hopefully get there.
The power of place, the power of ordinary urban landscapes to nurture citizens' personal and public memories, to encompass shared own time at the family group conference in the form of shared territory remains, in my opinion, untapped. So let's fuse together personal memory and the environment to create a more democratic and inclusive family group conference. Let us find and share this treasure with the citizens we work with.